Hello, welcome. I'm Pauline from Pauline's Quilters World, better known as PQW. We have a very exciting lesson for you, showing you how we use a layer cake pack. And if you don't know about a layer cake, they're 10-inch squares, pre-cut, usually a gorgeous blend of fabrics, or it can be a full range of fabrics. You can make any style of quilt with this. We're just going to make a small quilt for you to get you started, but it is all quilt as you go, and it's going to be amazing what you see, what we can create. These are not the colours I've used. I've used a red and green theme to put a holiday festive season look to our project. But what we're going to do, once you get all of your fabrics out of your pack, you can make a very big quilt out of one layer cake pack. What we've done with our quilt, we've made a smaller project, but we've used the fabrics out of the layer cake on the front and the back. But if you want to make your quilt larger, you would just use all of the squares, the 10-inch squares out of the pack on the front of the quilt, and then you could use whatever on the back. But I'm also going to use our 1/2 and 1/4 square triangle circle rulers. These are 3 rulers that come in a pack. This is going to allow me to get perfect triangles. So I'm going to take you through and show you step by step over this series of lessons how to make this beautiful quilt. I'm also going to use the little 1-inch by 10-inch ruler. I'm going to use the mini cutter, the 18mm cutter, because I love this to do on my cutting. And I'm going to use the Pauline fabric marking pencil. And I'm going to just take you through step by step how to create this quilt. So let's get started. The other thing that I'm going to use is my 3-in-1 workboard. I just find this works brilliantly for anything I do to achieve accuracy. This is the ironing surface. I can spread it out larger for a larger ironing surface. I have my cutting mat inside, but what I want to particularly focus on now is this fine sandpaper board. Because what we're going to do to start with, once we've sorted all our squares out, we're going to fold them in half on the diagonal. So I'll just fold them in half. And I do love to use the little mini iron, but you would possibly be using your big iron. We want to fold it in half and put a crease line in. I only need to do that on if we've sorted our fabrics into pairs, and we do need to sort them into pairs because we're going to create triangles. So on one of the squares out of your pair of colours, you will open it out. We're going to go to the sandpaper part of the board, and we're going to use the longest ruler out of the set. Now, if you don't want to use the longer ruler because of all the holes through the middle are for creating circles, but that's another whole lesson you can see on one of my other YouTube videos. Let's use this one because we've got a little line down through the centre. I'm going to align that line right on this crease line. And I'm going to draw a line either side of this ruler. I'm going to use the dark lead in this Pauline pencil. Now you notice using the sandpaper my fabric's not stretching as I draw. If I just had this on the surface, this fabric would all stretch as I drew down each side of this ruler, and that will cause me inaccuracy with creating my triangles. So I really recommend these boards as a very good investment. So just move it down and we'll continue drawing, putting the jotted line of the ruler right in the centre of that crease line. And draw, oops, ruler's just slipped. Draw either side. So there's my drawn line. Then I'm going to put my contrast fabric. So I'm always going to be putting a red and a green together. Pop those together. Use your flower head pins and just pop a pin. Oops, just get it off this sandpaper. Pop a pin in both sides just to hold those layers together. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch exactly on that line. So let's go over to the sewing machine and do that. It's very quick and easy. I would do a lot of preparation of all my different squares at this stage before I go to the sewing machine. Then I can just sit and stitch down and join the next one on and keep stitching and just chain piece them all together down one side, come back the other side. So let's go do that now. I have an open toe foot on my machine because I don't need to use a 1/4 inch foot. I'm just going to be stitching on the line. And you notice I've got this white slippery mat on the bed of the machine. I always have that on there. It's called a sew slip mat. It allows all my fabric just to glide through beautifully. So we're just going to stitch down the line on one side and then come back the other. Nothing hard about it, just stay right on the line. And I've drawn the line instead of just using my 1/4 inch foot because I want these to be exactly the same size. I find if I just use a 1/4 inch seam and the 1/4 inch foot, a lot of times I'm off with that seam allowance. So drawing the line, it's going to give me a much more accurate shape. And I wouldn't normally use such a contrast thread, but I wanted you to be able to see those lines of stitching. I would probably be more so using a medium grey thread to sew all of these colours together because it would blend. But I wanted you to be able to see it quite clearly. Now once we get this finished, we're going to go back to the cutting table. And we're going to slice and dice these up. So let's go back to that cutting table and take you to the next step. So at your cutting mat, I'm going to use a little 1 inch ruler and I'm going to lay it down on that creased line. And I should be able to have the 1/4 inch line of this ruler, sitting on the stitching line if everything's gone to plan. And I've always made sure that the tools I'm using, that the 1/4 inches all measure exactly the same, because on a lot of tools they don't. So just do a double check with that. Use a little blade and we just cut straight across through the middle. Just move it down, continue cutting. So you go through and make all your pairs up like that. Slice them apart and then always set your stitching line. So put the iron onto the stitching line and set it with a hot iron so your threads don't stretch. And then press out to the darkest. Just give a nice little press there. So go through and do all of that with all your pieces. And then we'll show you the next step, because it's a very easy step once again. There's 2 separate ones. So now what we do, I've got some separate ones made up here where I've got them all pressed. So we're now going to select different ones that are going to go together, and we're going to put them so that the green will go where the red is and the red will go with the green, and we'll pair them up like so. But before we do that, we'll do the press line through the middle, just so that we're getting everything spot on perfect here. The same with this one. Then we'll open them out. Red to green and green to red. We'll open out our sandpaper board again. And we're going to draw a line either side there, and we're going to stitch. So out of that now we're going to create a block like this. So we've got 4 different coloured triangles coming together. So let's just draw that line and we'll stitch that, we'll cut it up, and then we'll take the next step. So continue to do that with all of your pieces. And it's a very, very simple little quilt to make, but The exciting part comes when we get this together, and we're going to then in the next lesson show you how to quilt each of these blocks individually. Then in the third lesson we're going to show you how to join those blocks together with one of my quilt as you go techniques. And then in the fourth lesson we're going to show you how to piece a border together and quilt that border before you join it to the rest of the quilt. So there's a few steps we've got to take, but it's very simple and very exciting, and you can use this technique with any quilt that you want to create using one of my quilt as you go techniques. So draw those lines and then we'll go stitch them, and I'll come back and cut this apart, and then I'll show you what our next step is after this. So now we've got these two stitched together, so we've got our pairs all stitched. Just double check that you've got everything right, that you're happy with the combination, that you're meeting in the middle perfectly there, and you should be. Everything should turn out perfect for you. Then we just slice up through the middle as we did before, lining your 1/4 inch up with your stitching line. And you'll notice that the little rotary cutter doesn't distort the fabric as I cut. A lot of our bigger blades, as we cut, the bigger the blade, the bigger the rotation, the more that your fabric tends to surge ahead of yourself. Using the little blade, 18mm, you don't get that. You just get a perfect cut. So there we have that done, and all we do now is press these, set that stitching line, and press whichever way you like here. So there's our block made. So simple. Nothing hard about that. So just go around and make up different combinations like this. Then we'll come back and we'll show you how we're going to layer the 3 layers together, the back, the front and the batting. We're going to trace our quilting design on, and we're going to quilt a beautiful design in each one of these squares. So simple at our basic domestic sewing machine. I just want to now take you to the next stage, which is exciting. We're going to quilt each of the blocks. Now to get started, we're going to use these beautiful templates. I've designed these specially for us to be able to trace the design onto the fabric. We're then going to set the machine up, and I'll show you how to do all of that. We're going to trace the shape. We're going to use this leaf shape. But in the pack of templates, you get 3 different designs, which you can use for all different other projects. Once I show you how to use them, it makes quilting so much easier on your little domestic machine. So to start with, we'll set these aside. I'm going to cut out a backing fabric, or you can use one of your squares from your layer cake, as I have, because there's plenty in the packs. We've got our fabric square. We've got our block made up that we've constructed in lesson 1. Now, one of the important things that I really need to really point out to you is what is the right batting to use when we're doing my quilt as you go techniques. There's so many different battings out there on the market, but after many years of trialling nearly every single one that's out there, the one that's come up trumps for me is the Hobbs Heirloom double-sided fusible batting. This is 80% cotton, 20% polyester. It's a beautiful fibre. It's nice and thin to work with, but after we finish quilting it and we wash our quilt for the first time, it fluffs right up. It's very warm, it's snuggly, it quilts absolutely beautifully, and it never pills through your fibres of your fabric. Washes up like a dream. So we cut our wadding just about the same size as our finished square. It's fusible on both sides, so don't panic which is the right and which is the wrong side of it. It is the same, exactly the same on both sides. We layer up the 3 layers, and you'll notice our pre-cut square from the pack is bigger. That's fine because we've added seam allowance here and cut it all apart, so it will naturally be bigger. So what we do with a hot dry iron on an ironing surface, lay it out on your ironing surface, and we slowly press. We're not going to iron fast because we need the heat of the iron to penetrate into the batting to make the fusible activate. If we move the iron across the surface too fast, it won't stick. Once you're happy with that and you think it's all stuck on the front, flip it over, flatten it out and do the back. Just slowly press. So go through and iron up all your pieces. You might like to iron one at a time and sit down and quilt it, but I find it's best to iron them all up while I'm at the ironing surface. If for some reason when you've pressed, you've pushed this seam off skew and it's a little bit crooked, you can always peel this back and re-iron. It will stick many, many, many times. But remember, once we finish this project and we wash it for the first time, all that fuse will wash out. So now let's get to the exciting part. Let's trace our design onto our fabric. So we're going to use, as I said, this little template. We've got a little dot in it here. So what I want to do is line this little dot up on this seam allowance, and the tip of that leaf fits right onto this seam line. I'm going to use the pencil I used to mark my stitching line in the previous lesson. It's the Pauline fabric marking pencil. I'm going to use it with the white lead because I want it to show up on this dark fabric. And all we do is trace through that little split. Hold your pencil upright. Don't drag the lead across the surface of the fabric because it will snap the lead. Just have it upright and trace through all of those little splits. It'll take you a little while to mark out each of these designs, but it's so worth it because when we go to the machine, all we're going to do is stitch on that line. We're going to sew on a line. We're not actually going to do anything like free motion quilting or make quilting hard for you. We're going to make it terribly easy. So there's our first part of the pattern on there. Now if I just keep aligning this dot with this seam line and putting the point on this line, we'll keep marking around. Now I'm going to see if the white lead marks this dark fabric. And yes it is, I'm going to be able to see it. But if it didn't show up, I'd switch to my dark lead. So it's very handy to have two of these pencils on hand because you can just pick either of them up. And knowing that when I wash this project for the first time, the fusible will wash out of the batting and the pencil lines will wash out from this marking pen. I'm very particular what I mark my quilts with. I've had too many quilts damaged over the years using the wrong marking pencil. It's probably one of the things that I've had to invest the most money in. It's not a cheap pencil, but I can assure you that it is a pencil that you will love once you invest in it. Now we'll keep coming around. Now I know this white lead won't mark on this green fabric, so I'll pick up the darker lead and mark. So it's very enjoyable just standing here knowing that I'm going to have a beautiful design once I finish quilting, just simply by marking it so I can stitch on that line. So once we get the next one marked up, we'll go straight to the sewing machine, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how I set up the machine to be able to quilt very nicely on this. And you can notice here now, using this leaf, I'm getting a nice circular pattern. So it's going to take the triangle look away from the quilt and give it a nice flow. So I'm just going to go back to the white lead on this one. You know, you might decide that you don't want to use this leaf template. You might like to use one of the other templates in the pack. It's entirely up to you. And the templates are available on our website. Just have a look around. It's not the only pack of quilting templates we have designed up for Quilt As You Go. There's other ones there. You might choose that something else would suit your quilt better. But I particularly like the flow of the leaf. Whoops, I missed a little bit. And this is where it's really nice that you can go back and put that template straight over by using your little dot as your reference line, so you know exactly where that realigns back to. There we go. So there's our design already up, and you can see how it now flows around and gives that lovely circular motion, but it's also filling out most of the block. I'm not going to need to come and stitch down through these seams. I've got plenty of room left at the edges, so when I trim these blocks up and I go to join it together in my Quilt As You Go technique, I'm not going to interfere with the quilting pattern. So it fits there absolutely perfect. But as I said, you might like to come back and you might like to use one of these other designs. They'd all look fabulous on this. You might like to set this one on point, then it fills out the space much better. So let's take you to the sewing machine now. Let's get you set up and I'll show you the tools that I use at the machine to make quilting this design really, really simple. And like, this is all we're going to have to quilt. Each one of these blocks individually. At no stage do we have a big quilt going through the machine to quilt. So let's take you to the sewing machine. Now let's set your sewing machine up the way that I like to set mine up for sewing. A couple of little tips to make you comfortable at the machine. Grab yourself 2 rubber door wedges from a hardware store and prop them under the back of your machine so your machine tilts to you, so you're not leaning over the machine. You can see I'm sitting quite low. I always do that because I want to see what's happening at the needle. And I like my body to relax while I'm sewing, so these go under the back of the machine. If you want your machine tilted really a lot forward, put them right under, but I've just put them under a little bit because I just want that gentle slope. Now the other thing that I need on my machine to make quilting these blocks very simple is a sew slip mat. This is a product that comes with the brown paper on the back. We're going to peel the paper off the back. That's protecting the sticky side. The sticky side is going to go down onto the bed of the machine. We have this little cutout here that's going to go over around the feed dog area. So we're going to put it on. Make sure your feed dogs are exposed, and it's very sticky so it grabs to the machine well. Now I'm going to pat it down, but before I pat it down I need to draw my bobbin thread up from underneath. Otherwise it's going to get stuck under there and it'll keep breaking. So always drag your bobbin thread up. Once you do that, pat this down. I want to pat it down. But a little tip before you put it on your machine, make sure you wipe the bed of your machine down because you don't want any fluff or lint that you've got there to grab to that sticky back. But when you purchase these off us, I give you a care instruction little thing that's on the top of it, so read that through so that you know how to care for this, because you can wash it regularly to keep getting that fluff that builds up on the back of it off it. Now I have put, because I've got all different squares on the back of each block, I have put the monopoly clear thread in my bobbin. Now if you've not used this thread before, it is absolutely magnificent. It's not a nylon thread, it is a clear thread. It doesn't jam up in your bobbin, it doesn't jam up in the top, it doesn't stretch, it doesn't melt. So if you want to know how to wind this on your bobbin and put it on your machine properly so you have none of those problems happening, have a look at my YouTube channel where I show you how to use this thread perfectly and you'll get a brilliant result. I've got a regular cream thread, a nice shiny cream thread on the top because I feel that will blend in with all of my colours I've used. I've got my machine set on a regular stitch length at 2.55, but we'll talk about that again in a moment. The foot I use, it's very important. It's an open toe foot. Now, an open toe foot, you can buy them for every brand of machine. It's a foot that has nothing in the front. It's completely opened. And I need that foot so that I can see the design that I've traced onto my fabric. So we'll pop that foot on. Now, because we're using the Hobbs Heirloom double-sided fusible batting, we don't need a walking foot. And that's the good thing, and one of the brilliant things besides it not being bulky. That's the reason why I use it, because I don't need any pins, I get no bulk, I don't need a walking foot. So the whole construction of this quilt is I use 1 foot and 1 foot only on the machine. It's the open toe foot. So let's get started. Now, stitch length. We need to work out what is the best stitch length for you to use. It's a small design. We don't want a big long stitch length, but we don't want our stitch too small that it's going to cut through the batting. Small, really tiny stitches will eventually cut through the batting with wear and tear. So on my machine, what I usually do when I get everything set up to start stitching, I'll set my machine on a regular stitch length, and I'll do a little test down the side, just close to the edge, because I know I'll be trimming up the edges when I finish quilting, because it will pull in a little bit, and I will need to tidy up the edges. But before we start stitching, I want you to put your foot pedal directly under your needle, and I want you to try sewing with your left foot instead of your right foot. Now, that challenges a lot of people. The reason I started sewing with my left foot was the pressure I was getting up between my shoulder blades. And I found that was all happening because when I put my foot pedal out to the right, I was actually twisting my spine, and that's why I was getting all that pressure building up. Sewing with your left foot directly under the needle, this is where we're centred to the left side of our machine. We're not centred over here to the right. So being on the left and using the left foot, I'm now sitting with a perfectly straight spine. I have my machine speed set on the highest speed, and sewing with my left foot, I'll get a much better speed control for coming in and out around these corners. The other thing on a lot of our machines, which is a wonderful feature, and I would say would be a feature you would look at if you were investing in a new sewing machine, is the dial on your machine that allows you to adjust the pressure on your sewing foot. Some machines have it at the top here, a little dial. Some machines you open the door and there's a little dial inside. Some machines have it in the computer part of the machine where you can go in and you can adjust the pressure on the foot. Mine dial is at the side, and I can dial this to put much more pressure on the foot or much less pressure on the foot. So I'm going to take that right off. So now when I sew, I'm able to rotate this fabric without too much pressure on the foot. So we'll do that little test down the side. I have my machine set at 2.5. We'll just have a look at that. Now it's a little bit tiny, so I'm going to adjust it up to 2.55 and see how that is. So I'll just put it up one little dial. Do another little tester. I'm checking that my tension's perfect. And if you have trouble tensioning your machine, have a look at our YouTube video on how to tension your machine perfectly. Now, I'm really happy with that now. So that's the stitch length that I will use. So if you go and do the little tester till you get your tension and your stitch length the way you want it, you're ready to start stitching. So doing this design, it doesn't matter whether I start at this end of the leaf or this end of the leaf. But what I'm going to do, I can start in the middle here. I can come around. I'll just use this little awl. We can start here. We can come around. We can come out to here, come around, out to here, and around, and start the next one. Or we can go around, out, around, out, and around and start the next one. You can't get lost. It's very easy. So pull your bobbin thread up so that you don't get a mess underneath. So just hand wind your needle down or push your needle up, needle down button. Pull your bobbin thread to the top, and I know it's hard to see that clear thread, but it is there. And you notice I use the awl to pull that through because it is like my third finger. And I'm going to use this a lot when I start quilting, just to stop things bunching up if it starts to happen. We're going to put our stitch length to 0. We're going to do a couple of stitches in the one spot, and we're going to now increase up to 1. Do a couple of stitches, and then we're going to go up to 2.55. You can tie your threads off and bury them instead of doing this. It's your choice, whichever way you want to quilt. So now we're just going to stitch on that line. Just pivoting that around under the needle. Now, why this is pivoting so easy for me is the Sew Slip mat is doing a lot of the work for me. It's allowing it to glide around. Having the pressure off the foot is making it very easy. So coming around there, I didn't even have to lift the foot of the machine. Speed up. And I'm just going to cut these couple of threads off here. Now I'm going to come out. I'll lift the foot and come around. So you see, I haven't even got my hands up here. I'm not hunched over the machine. I'm just gliding from the front. One hand is all I need. I'm getting up to the point. I'll stop right on the point, lift your foot and come around. Now, if I was working on a big quilt, this would be really hard because I'd have the bulk of the quilt and I'd have too much turning and dragging the quilt through. So that's why I'm working on one block at a time. Come out. One more stitch. Come around. So you can see I'm not really quilting, I'm actually just stitching on a line. It's just like sewing a seam. And you can see how lovely the design looks. I think you'll be very, very thrilled if you've not quilted before or if you've been challenged quilting nice designs. So I'm right back to where I started. Now I'll come on to the next part of the pattern. So this time I'm starting on the outside. And I'll go back into the middle now. I'll come around the centre one. Just take it slow around that corner. Now I'm just stitching over the line that I went in on till I get to the next line and around. So just work your way around. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You're just filling in on every line till you get the whole design quilted. So in a moment I'm going to show you one that is completely quilted, and we'll have a look at the back so you can see how great the invisible thread is on the back, if you can see it. My machine's threaded perfectly, so I'm not having any tension problems. I'm not having the thread breaking. I'll iron over the thread so you can see that it doesn't melt. So we would now continue on till we get the rest of the design finished. So we're going to go back to my work table and we're going to show you the block finished, the invisible thread, how I can iron over the thread, and then the next lesson is going to be joining your rows together and putting the whole thing into a quilt. So come and join me at the cutting table. All the blocks are quilted. Yay, we got it all done. So you can see how lovely the design looks and how simple that was to quilt. And I think if you're following along with me, you'll agree. It is so simple to do. The creamy coloured thread shows up beautifully on all my colours. I've pressed the block and I've trimmed it up. Now I'm just going to flip the block over so that you can see if I iron on this clear thread, it's not melting. It just is a beautiful thread to use. Now let's have a look at all the beautiful quilting that we've got here. Can you see that on the back? Some fabrics, the design will show up more than others because of the fabric print. Some fabric prints just don't allow your quilting to show up. Some of your plainer colours, the quilting will show up magnificently. So our next step to this is we're going to start joining all the blocks into rows in my Quilt As You Go technique, and then we'll join the rows together. Gets very simple from here on in.